Today we're going to learn how to play the kalimba. Step 0, you need to first get a kalimba. Now that sounds easier than it actually is, because the kalimba is unlike other instruments where you can just go run out and buy that instrument because they all are pretty much the same. The kalimba comes in many different types of configurations. They look completely different than one another and they play completely differently. So I'm going to help narrow down your search. The first question you might have is, how many keys do you want to use when you're playing the kalimba? Because, I mean, do you want 5 keys, 10 keys, 15, 17, 21? It's already daunting because there's just so many different types, but really, let's just make it easy. The amount of keys that you're looking for are the 17 key kalimbas. It's a great amount of notes to start with. You won't find yourself like, you're playing and you're like, where's that note? 17 keys gives you a good range to start with. And there are not so many tines, these little metal things are called tines, that it's confusing or daunting. It's just the right amount to me. And now if you're trying to play the kalimba with one hand, 5 or 10 keys is actually not a bad setup where you would be able to make music. But if you're trying to learn, the standard kalimba music that you might have found on YouTube already, or just want to accompany a song, 17 keys is a great size to start with. Now, one thing that makes it easier to play the kalimba are these little note markings. Let's see if we can get in here. This particular kalimba has the notes of what these tines are supposed to be tuned, or they come, standard tuned with. And so it goes C, D, E, G, etc. And as a beginner, that is really helpful because instead of having to okay, I know the bottom note is C and then having to count, the intervals, it just has it engraved right here. Now, don't let that be a showstopper for you, because many kalimbas that don't come with it etched into the tine have little stickers that you can use to give you kind of a reference point of where each note is. But make sure to look for that. If it doesn't come with the stickers, you might need to make your own. But that's a really great way to get started, because it can just, rather than having to figure out the intervals, you can just see it at a glance. Now, later down the road, that might actually hurt your learning. So maybe it's better to find one without the etched and it just has the stickers, and then when you're ready, you can go stickerless. This is especially true because the kalimba can be tuned to actually many different notes, but the engravings relate to the tuning that it's designed for. Furthermore, there are so many different keys of instruments to worry about. The kalimba can, just like many instrument, can come in the key of B or the key of C or the key of G. Which key do you want? Well, as a beginner, I really recommend the key of C, because it is just so versatile, and many different songs that you listen to or play are in the key of C, or in a key that can be very easily playable by a key of C kalimba. So I would definitely start with the key of C if you're a beginner. Another thing to look for when you're trying to shop for a beginner kalimba is that to look for good sustain. Now, what does sustain mean? Well, I'll give you an example. So if I hit this bottom note, it's just that pleasing tone for several seconds. But if I try and hit this top note, it's very short. Now, that can be by design. If you're playing fast pieces, that can actually work out for you. But I've found myself many times not being able to really hear that note. It's just so short. The sustain was really short. So there are many different kalimba models that sound differently on those higher tines. And so I think that it would be best to get one that is more versatile and has higher sustain on those high notes, and so that you can actually hear it as you play. I would check out this video that compares many different kalimbas and the sound, so that you can find the sound that you're looking for. You don't have to take my word for it. You can find the sound that really works for you. And so the best is to really, shop around and look at which kalimba has the ideal sustain and the ideal sound just for you. As a note on the sustain, if you're wanting a kalimba that has better sustain, these hollow body kalimbas like this one, where it's like, there's an open hole and it's a hollow body, it actually has less sustain than the solid body kalimbas. All right, so that's step 0. We haven't actually gotten to messing with the instrument, and this is where I need my phone. So step 1 is to tune your kalimba if it needs it. Now, your kalimba probably came pre-tuned, so you might not have to tune it at all. If it sounds good, I would recommend not touching it until you get comfortable with the instrument. Touching it in the sense of you don't have to tune it. But if it doesn't sound right, or if you want to double check the tuning, then what you need to do is find a tuning app, and I use an app on Android called G Strings. It's really great. There's lots of free tuning applications out there, and what you do is that you pluck the tine and try and match it up with the note that it's supposed to be. If you don't have a smartphone, then you can use a reference note such as from a piano, and if you don't have a piano, you can use an online piano and just play the note and then just use the kalimba to try and match that tone. So this kalimba is a C kalimba, and so the bottom note is actually C. So I'm gonna hit the bottom note, which is a C, and then I'm gonna check it out on the tuner. So the needle is above 130.8. It's 132 is what it's measuring. So I have, the pitch is too high, and so I need to lengthen out the metal, because the longer the metal, the lower the note is. And so I need to push this tine actually lower in order to get that to happen. And so a kalimba is often going to come with this cool little hammer. You get the kalimba and you carefully tap the note down if you want to lower the pitch. If you want to raise the pitch, you need to push it up. We're getting there. Almost. Oh, tuning is super important. Part of the kalimba's magic is that it's beautiful tones, and if those tones aren't matching with each other, then it's just going to not be as pleasing of a sound. It's a great thing to ensure that your kalimba is all tuned up and ready to go. Step 2, let's talk about the basic techniques to actually play the kalimba. So the basic technique of the kalimba is to pluck the tines. Now notice I'm not plucking the tines from under here and letting the tines jab underneath my fingernail. You can really hurt yourself, and you don't necessarily need fingernails, but some people do prefer to pluck the tines with their fingernails. But since I don't have fingernails to speak of, you can just play by just rubbing down on the tine and letting go, and it scrapes against your fingernail slightly when you do that. But that is the essential technique that will work well for you. Now the other option is that you can actually lay the kalimba flat like this and use your fingers to pluck. It's actually very difficult for me because I'm very used to playing with my thumbs, but it's a very valid method that will work for you. And if you get used to it, you can even have some extended flexibility because you can play more notes at once. But really, the most comfortable way to play is with your thumbs, but just know that it is possible to play with your fingers like this. When you're playing, it's important to try and pluck only one note at a time. What do I mean by that? So if I try and play, so it sounds great. I mean, that's what is so wonderful about the kalimba, the way it's organized. The notes just sound really well together. But the problem with that is that if you're trying to play a melody, it becomes kind of muddy. So an important thing to strive for is to play one note at a time. And also, if you have a ring, it's going to buzz. So I'm going to try and take that off for a second. So those are the basic plucking techniques, but I'm going to show you a couple exercises to really help your technique get even better, to really hone that technique. But first I wanted to mention that this channel is all about music and about learning tons of different types of instruments. So if you're interested in learning instruments in general, make sure and subscribe to this channel. So when you practice, it's always a good idea to practice with a metronome. And I admit I'm not super great at doing this every time, but when I do, I improve so much more quickly. I'm so much more able and ready to play along with music when I practice with the metronome. It's kind of a chore because I mean it's kind of annoying. You're listening to this tap, 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 but it's super important. So I'm going to link to a metronome app that I really like to use in the description. This takes us to our next part is, as you're trying to strive to, master that technique, scales are an excellent way to do that because the scale, it teaches you to be able to play notes close together and alternating, and that is an essential technique because often melodies, they move one note at a time, and so you need to be able to go quickly in that kind of pattern. And so the C major scale goes like this, as I just played it. And that is a great system, and you can keep going if you want. You can go. And that is a really great thing to practice, is just going up and down. And then once you're tired of that, you can start on a different note. If you start on D, and you keep on moving up the kalimba, and if you practice that, you will be able to play all of the notes and be comfortable wherever you are on the kalimba. And if you're trying to play along with me, you may notice that you're plucking multiple notes. Again, try to get it where you can play just one note at a time. It's a really good thing to shoot for. Now, after that, another way you can practice is by doing arpeggios. Here's an example of the C major arpeggio. What's an arpeggio? It's just a grouping of notes in this particular scale. And this is good because many songs use those kinds of patterns. And this is also good because I'm starting on C, E, G, C, and then going back down again. It helps you know, like, okay, C and C are right here. That's also good to know. So the pattern continues just up 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then up again to the E minor. And that sounds really good too. And this technique will really help you when you learn to play songs. An important thing also to be able to do is to be able to play the octaves. You'll just find that a lot of songs that you play, just really require that kind of knowledge. So here's C, and then I can find D, E, F, and so on, all the way up the kalimba. A really great thing to practice. Now that you've kind of got some of the basic techniques and have got some practices that you can do to practice those techniques, let's talk about songs. There are 2 different ways to really approach playing songs on the kalimba. You can either play the melody or you can play chords. So let's talk about playing the melody. And when I say melodies, like when you hum a song, you are often humming the melody. It's the catchy part of the song, what the vocalist is singing. And this is one way to approach playing the kalimba. And if you want to play an actual song, this is generally the approach that you want to do. So if you hear a song that you like and you're trying to like pluck out the notes, there are a couple things to help you. There's something called kalimba tabs. Tabs just means tablature, which is just another way of saying special sheet music specific to this instrument. So a kalimba tablature is just a way to show the notes that it makes it easier to play. So one way that you might see kalimba tabs is through just seeing notes, just like this. And you can see that these letters in this cryptic fashion are they just match up with the notes on the kalimba. So for example, this one starts with C, E, A, G. So I just basically play the notes as I see them, and I'm on my merry way. Now the problem with this method that you may have noticed is that there's no rhythm. There's no, like, you see the notes, but it doesn't tell you how long to hold a note. And so that's kind of a limitation. You have to kind of know the song ahead of time before you can actually play it in this fashion. So I'm going to demonstrate what it would sound like if I was to play this song, and I'm going to do that at about 90 beats per minute. All right, so that's one way that you can see music tablature for the kalimba. Now another way is a lot more fancy, and it's more specific to the kalimba, and I'll show you what that would look like. I used an application called K-tabs to make that tab. I'll give you a link to it in the description if you're interested in making your own tabs. And if you notice, there's some funky things going on here. It resembles the shape of the kalimba. You can see that the bottom tines here match kind of with the bottom of the tab. And there's these little dots with these lines extending off to the side. And those dots and those lines actually communicate the actual rhythm of the song. And so they're very important. But before we really dive into that, you kind of have to understand some basics about sheet music. Feel free to skip this section, go to the link go to the description, and I will show you the section right after learning sheet music if you already know sheet music. But if you don't, I'm going to give you a super quick primer that will help you prepare you for learning kalimba tabs. So the way most of our music is in 3/4 time or 4/4 time. What that means that the song has 4 beats in a measure. I'm simplifying it just a little bit just so that we can make some progress. So when you hear someone counting off 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that song can be broken up into these chunks 4 beats long. And if a song is 3/4, then it would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, kind of like a waltz or that style of music. But most popular music today that you'll listen to is either in 4/4 and sometimes in 3/4 or 6/8, which is like double 3/4, but don't worry about that. That beat that I just did, 1, 2, 3, 4, can be represented by a dot with a line extending out of it. And I'm going to do it 4 times, and that represents this 1, 2, 3, 4, which is great. And those are called quarter notes because there's 4 of them, and all of them together form one measure. And then if we were to split these notes in half, like what if I want to do 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, well, you can do that with sheet music, and it looks like this. Notice that they have a little bit of a flag that connects with other notes. That is an 8th note. So we basically took a 4th and then cut it in half, and now we have an 8th note. And now I've taught you the basics that you will need to be able to interpret this tab that I showed you previously. So let's take a look at it again. So we see that the note, the little dot, matches up with the tine on the kalimba. If you look down on the side of the sheet music or the tablature, you can see that it looks very much like those sheet music notes that I was showing you earlier. And so these first 4 notes, these are quarter notes. So it's, and then the preceding notes go like this. They're about half the length of the quarter notes. And so I'm going to play this piece slowly at about 90 beats per minute and give you a sample of what it would be like to play a tab to this song. So those are 2 kalimba tabs, but you actually don't need tabs to be able to learn the kalimba. You can actually just read sheet music just like you would for a piano. It's a little bit more tricky because it's, it's all about like learning the meaning of all the markings, and there's quite a bit of music theory. But if you do learn it, then you can go onto Google and look up the sheet music for your favorite song, download it, and be able to play it on the kalimba. And so it can be really worth your time if you spend the time to learn how to read sheet music, and can work out for you. Great. So we've talked about the first way to, approach playing kalimba, and that's by playing melodies. The second way is by playing chords. Now, what are chords? Well, it's time that we look at the piano to kind of get a better sense. The piano is a little bit easier to visualize, like what's going on musically. The term chord is basically any 2 notes together. So here's a chord, and that chord is C major, and it's the notes C, E, and G. Now the kalimba is super cool because it has the notes C, E, G right next to each other. So if you look, that matches the notes on the piano, and so that is true for the whole kalimba. So if I were to go to a D minor chord, that's how you'd play it on the kalimba, just those 3 notes. And then on the piano, it would look like this. So in that same shape. So essentially, I could move my hand like this on the piano, and I could do that same thing on the kalimba by just going like this. So this E minor chord, which is like on the piano like this, is like this on the kalimba. That's why the kalimba is so great for playing chords. It's just really ideal for that kind of thing. So now that we know some chords, I'm going to look at a guitar tab. And guitar tabs are different than kalimba tabs often because they show the chords that you play for that particular spot in the music. But you can use guitar chords to play the kalimba. Cool life hack, now you have unlocked thousands of different songs because, oh man, if you look at for guitar tabs, you will always be able to find them because there's so many, and the guitar is such a popular instrument. So you can look up a guitar chord tab and then be able to play. So here's an example song that I cooked up for this purpose, and I'm going to play a chord, a rhythm on this chord. Now that sounded all right, but there's a lot more that you can do. There's tons of different rhythms. You can even make that rhythm a little bit funky. Possibilities are endless with the different amount of rhythms that you can do while playing chords on the kalimba. Even more than that, you can add even some variation. So this left thumb over here was getting pretty bored, so if I could try and play that again. Now, if you're looking up guitar tab music, remember that you only have a limited amount of chords to work with because the kalimba, the 17-key kalimba, actually only has 7 different notes. I mean, so yeah, 17 keys, 7 different notes. How does that work? Well, if you notice, the notes actually repeat themselves. And so there's only 7 different notes to play in different octaves. And so you can't play every note. And so that means you only have some chords that are available. But here are the chords that are available to play on the kalimba. And again, each of these chords, if you just take the bottom note, like say, for example, C, I would just go to the right. Or if I start on a D, I get a D minor if I go the other way. Pretty nifty. Now, since you only have these chords available, you might run into the problem where you look for a chord for the song that you want to play and it has completely different chords that you're expecting. Well, thankfully, if you go to Ultimate Guitar, for example, and look up a song, I found this one, for example, you can see the chords like, oh, but I don't have that. I don't have D, I have D minor, or I don't have A, I have A minor. Well, never fear, often you can transpose. So at the bottom of this page and in different guitar tab tools, you can hit the transpose button. So what if I go down one? That doesn't look great either. I don't have any sharps or flats on this instrument. Well, never fear. No, we're not done here. Just hit the transpose button again. There we go. Now these are some chords that I can play on this kalimba. And that's all it takes. Often the songs that you want to play are accessible if you just hit the transpose button and get it into a format that you're looking for. And that just opens up a whole new world. You can just, play the chords to the song and accompany other people, or, it's even just fun to play the kalimba just with that. Step 6. Now that you've learned how to play melody and chords, the ultimate goal is to learn how to play both together. That's right, playing the melody with one hand and playing chords with the other hand. This is a difficult thing, and it takes an enormous amount of practice, but that is kind of the next step to take your kalimba playing. And so the thing you can do is to learn how to play with chords, learn how to play melodies, and just practice putting those together. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you haven't already, I would make sure and check out this video. Thanks for watching.